Hello. Okay, this is 2017 question number 1. I'm not going to go through every single part of the question, but I did want to highlight things that I think might be tricky for some. So I'm going to take a look at A, I'm going to take a look at B, and then I'm going to take a look at E. Okay, so A, remember at the very beginning, apologize for using different colors, we have an assume, so that gives us information necessary to start what we're going to do. In A, it says, using numerical values above, draw a correctly labeled graph of the short run and long run Phillips curves. Okay, you can probably remember what SRPC and LRPC look like. But you may be stressing out about the next sentence because label the current short run equilibrium as point B. Where does point B go? And then plot the numerical values above on the graph. So if we go back up to the assume, we have an actual rate of unemployment of 7% and NRU, a natural rate of unemployment of 5%. So we know that the U rate is greater than NRU. So if we were to, and I apologize for the terribleness of my drawings, if we were to look at this in ASAD, we'd know that if the U rate is greater than the NRU, SRAS and AD intersect to the left of LRAS, so we have a recessionary gap. So we need to mirror this in the Phillips curve land. We need a point of 7% that is greater than the NRU. So if jumping to the conclusion, you'll notice that B is to the right of LRPC. So the unemployment rate is 7%, which is greater than 5%. So point B is plotted to the right. And then the y-intercept is 3, which is the inflation rate. So inflation rate goes here on the vertical axis and unemployment on the horizontal axis. Okay. Make sure that you again use numbers like they showed in the answer. Now B, assume that the government of country X takes no policy action to reduce unemployment. In the long run, which will each of the following shift to the right, the left, or remain the same? So we have 3 options. We need to pick one of them for each of little I1, SRAS, and little I2, the long run Phillips curve. So SRAS, and if you haven't tried this already, take a moment and try to figure out where is SRAS going to go. And the hint is here, our starting situation. And if you still don't have the hint, I will cheat and give you the answer. But we need to go back and take a look at something that we looked at several months ago. Okay, if we have a deflationary or recessionary gap, and I will go through the slides again real quick. First, remember that we have 2 main views in economics, and of course there are many others. One is the neoclassical monetarist view, and the other one is a Keynesian view. So monetarists feel, and neoclassical economists feel, that the market forces will resolve any disequilibria or problems in the market themselves. The government doesn't need to get involved. But the Keynesians believe that there's a far more active role for government. And again, you can use the neoclassical model throughout the AP exam, and that's all you really need. In life, you should probably consider both and many others. So, we have a situation where we have a recessionary gap. Something causes AD to decrease. So we're at point B. Now the question is, how do we get back to long-run aggregate supply? And this is where SRAS comes to play. So if you recall the story of this, we move from price level 1 to price level 2. So we have a decrease in price level, which causes the decrease in the price of goods and services, but also things like labor, which is an input cost for firms. Because of the lower input costs for firms, firms have an incentive now to produce more because they can afford to have more labor, they can have more inputs because it costs less, and SRAS will shift to the right because input costs are one of the determinants of SRAS. And again, if you can't remember any of the determinants of SRAS, please remember, does it lower per unit production costs? In this case, yes. Lower labor cost will lead to lower input costs, which will encourage firms to produce more. So we end up at C, which is at a lower price level 3, but we're back in long-run equilibrium. So if we come back to here, SRAS will shift to the right, and the explanation could be something along the lines of the lower price level allows firms to hire workers for lower wages, which is means lower input costs, lower cost of production, encouraging firms, giving them the incentive to produce more. And I will provide a very simple and very cogent, like the minimum viable answer you could use for this question in a separate document. And then the second one, long-run Phillips curve, will it shift to the right, shift to the left, or remain the same? If we recall, long-run Phillips curve is vertical at the level of the natural rate of unemployment. Unless something has come along to change the natural rate of unemployment for our country, we can assume that the long-run Phillips curve is in the same place it was before. So we have no information to suggest the NRU has changed. NRU remains constant, therefore long-run Phillips curve remains the same. All right, skipping down to E. Based on the change in real GDP identified in Part D, will the supply of country X's currency in the foreign exchange market increase, decrease, or remain the same? Again, we have three options, but we also have an explanation that's required. So we have to go back up to D, and I'll skip ahead and tell you that it encourages you. I apologize for the very unpretty nature of my drawings, but AD will increase. So when AD increases, part of you are probably thinking grits, and they're like, oh crap, the price level has gone up, that means inflation has gone up, that means this country X is now a less attractive destination for people's money because they typically like to avoid inflation. That's true, but the default thinking for the AP is if AD increases, which means real GDP or output has also gone up, we assume that the country is richer. And a richer country typically means that a middle class or a larger group of people within that country demand imports from other countries. Luxury goods, those things that are not produced in the country or have brand value or prestige from other places. Therefore, the demand for imports will increase, and before we can get imports from another country, we first need to get that country's currency, and before we can do that, we need to supply some of our own. So country X's currency, they'll supply more of country X's currency in the market, which will cause the value of that currency to depreciate. But in this case, question E, they're only asking for increase, decrease, remain the same. You would say decrease because increasing incomes or increasing national income will cause more consumers or households to demand more imported goods. Done.